Yeah, welcome back to another author interview at Crystal Lake. And today my guest is Rafael Canoa. We're here to talk about his fantasy book, Bloodlines. Yeah, we're taking a step away from horror today. So I'm going to turn it over to him and let him introduce himself. So take it away.
Hi everyone, my name's Rafael. Coming to you from Vancouver, Canada, and yeah, very happy to be here. This is it's my first novel, so please bear with me if I stumble a little on the questions or the lingo of the industry. This is all very new to me, but just excited and very happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you here. And I guess both sides of Canada are being represented because I'm over on the Atlantic side in Nova Scotia.
Alrighty, very cool.
Okay, so give everyone a quick overview of the book. What is Bloodlines about?
So obviously, it's a fantasy novel, and it's one that focuses on that eternal question of destiny versus free will. Are we safe in the assumption that our actions are indeed our own, or is there a grand script that's been written for us in advance? Is choice an illusion, and what happens when everything you know is challenged in ways that can't be ignored? Um, Heritage and belief are two of the main themes of the book, and they're explored through the discovery of a shared element among the characters in the story, hence the meaning of the title, Bloodlines, though it's not always in the traditional sense of the word.
Oh, that sounds cool. And yeah, the the whole destiny versus free will is a pretty good fantasy, solid fantasy.
Yeah, always a good
Yeah.
one to go with.
So, what were your inspirations for the book?
Well, the main source of inspiration for me was the tabletop role-playing game known as Dungeons and Dragons. I was first introduced to it back in the mid 80s, and I quickly fell naturally into the role of the dungeon master, who's essentially the referee of the game. And it's a position that requires a great deal of imagination, inventiveness, improvisation, and those are qualities that definitely proved very useful when I decided to write this book. It was from those countless game sessions that the idea took shape, to take all of those copious amounts of notes and adventures that I wrote down and actually compile them into a cohesive narrative that eventually became the novel's main plot.
Yeah, well, you're in good company. A lot of fantasy authors I've interviewed have said D&D is one of their inspirations. So
Yeah.
that's a real common one. So,
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about the cast of characters. How do their journeys unfold?
So the narrative's broken up with every third chapter telling the individual story of one of the three main characters. They are Flynn, Vorax, and Ellianna. And all three are very different individuals, hailing from different cultures and places, though they do share some similarities in their background and circumstances that the reader will quickly pick up on. The way that their journeys progress is by starting with the status quo of their lives being disrupted by an event that's unique to each of them, but sets them on the path to seeking answers about themselves and their place in the world in which they live.
Okay, so of course, every epic fantasy has to have a good world building, a rich setting. So, what's the world of Bloodlines like?
Um, so Bloodlines takes place in Akar, which is a world much like our own in many respects, though set in a time and technological level that is somewhat parallel to our medieval era of history. Uh, I purposely try to make it familiar in a way that doesn't force the reader to try and wrap their heads around concepts that are so strange that they become hard to envision. Um, it's also a polytheistic world with many deities being worshipped through various religions, but ones whose powers manifest themselves in many ways, including the use of magic, or as I call it in the book, the etherius.
Interesting. The polyist. What? Okay, I can't say that word apparently today, but many gods.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a common fantasy
Mhm.
things as well. I mean, I've used it myself in my fantasy books. So, in fact, my
Mm.
main character is actually a god. So,
Oh, there you go.
yeah. So, what favorite fantasy tropes? I mean, you mentioned gods and magic, but have you incorporated into the story, and how have you interpreted them?
Well, the kind of world I just described is it's a common enough fantasy trope in itself, but to go a little more into detail about that, yeah, it does have elves and dwarves, and maybe even a dragon or two, among other things the reader might recognize from this genre. Um, Given that, as I mentioned earlier, the main source of inspiration is Dungeons and Dragons, which itself owes everything to Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings. My interpretations of those things, they're not so different from what you'd find in that book or the game itself, but I do add or change some elements that I hope folks aren't as familiar with. um, I hesitate to use the term unique because this is such a rich and well-trodden genre that it's nearly impossible to claim something as original, though I've certainly given it a try. And I can sincerely hope that the reader will be surprised and pleased by a thing or two I've got in there.
No, that's good. Yeah. Anyway, and yeah, definitely mention the dragons whenever you talk about the book.
Hmm.
I don't know what it is, but the dragons always get the readers.
They're always a big hit.
Yeah, everybody loves a dragon. Okay, so
Mhm.
what are the stakes of Bloodlines? I mean, what kind of antagonistic forces do the heroes face?
Okay, without giving too much away, I'd say the stakes, they're about as high as one could imagine them to be, or at least from the perspective of the characters in the book. Their actions or inaction could alter everything that they know, and that could be a good thing or a bad thing. Again, it depends on the perspective. There are two forces of conflict here with two very different outcomes, and the heroes have to decide which side of the line to fall on. In terms of what is and what isn't antagonistic, that can be a very fluid thing throughout. It could be the friend you thought you could trust the most, or the god you've spent your entire life devoting yourself to. Um, the idea is to keep the reader guessing at every turn, and it may take a while to reach those answers.
It sounds like you have some interesting moral choices sprinkled throughout the book.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, that's very intriguing. So what's your plan with the world of Bloodlines? Is this a standalone book? Or are you planning on a series?
I've always envisioned it as a series of novels, like a continuing story that's told across several volumes. When I first began to write Bloodlines, it quickly became apparent that there was no way I could fit all of it within one book. As it is, several people who know its length have already commented on how massive it is, and it's funny because though I certainly didn't write it overnight, it doesn't seem all that long to me. That's just funny how perspective works, but yeah, the plan is for a trilogy at the very least, but it could easily go beyond that. I do have an end game in sight, so fear not. It won't be like The Wheel of Time or Dune or Game of Thrones. Um, Beyond that, I'd love to continue on with other tales, perhaps set in this world, perhaps not, or to maybe even develop this into material that's usable for an RPG, like Dungeons and Dragons, that others can adventure in a game format. But getting way ahead of myself there. So yeah,
Yeah, it's always good to plan future things.
of course, yeah.
So, yeah. So, what's your favorite scene in the book?
Um, the final chapter for sure. As I wrote the book, each new scene became a favorite over the previous one. I write sequentially. That's to say, I write each chapter in the same order in which it appears in the book. Which, to hear from a couple of friends of mine who also write, it's unusual and even downright bizarre. For me, it just feels natural, though. It all just kind of flows that way. So the final revelation in the book, both for the character involved and the reader, is one that I really enjoyed writing and really throws the door wide open for what's to follow.
Mm, yeah. Well, I know a few writers that write like that as well. They can't write.
Mm.
They can't skip things. They have to write it all in
Yeah.
order. Yeah, and so I mean, everyone's writing process is different.
Hmm.
So, Did you find anything challenging about writing the book? Did the scene or a character give you any trouble?
Does procrastination count?
Yeah, kind of. I know that one very well.
Yeah, mastering the discipline necessary for to keep going and turn writing into a daily habit was quite the challenge for sure. Another aspect of writing I struggled with was continuity and keeping track of various details like things said, character traits, physical or otherwise, especially as the cast of characters grew into telling. At one point, I downloaded some software designed especially for writers just to keep all of this stuff organized and easily referenced, and it was a lifesaver. With scenes or characters specifically, I guess I would say making sure motivations and personalities remain consistent throughout was very important. Showing growth and change is, of course, important, but these are things that should happen gradually, not in a way that throws the reader completely off, like comes out of left field. Um, Another thing is trying to imagine how a member of an imaginary species would think and behave. They can't just be different from human beings simply by virtue of their physical appearance. So there has to be other things that set them apart, yet not seem so alien to us that has to be completely unrelatable. So I find that's something I always need to keep my eye on.
Yeah, yeah, it's a problems in all fantasy, right? Especially the continuity. That's why so many
Mhm.
of us. That's why so many of us talk about having a series Bible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
keeping all that those little facts straight and referencing. Yeah, I've been doing that a
Mhm.
little of that myself lately, working on book two in a series. So yeah.
Mhm.
So why did you decide to write in the fantasy genre? Was there particular inspiration that kindled your interest?
Well, it's my favorite genre. Pretty much the only one I'd consider tackling a whole novel series in, other than perhaps science fiction. Um, Fantasy is what I'm most comfortable with. It began when I first read The Hobbit as a teenager. And before that, I was more into sci-fi, like Star Trek, Star Wars, Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers, etc. But The Hobbit and then The Lord of the Rings changed everything for me. I love everything about it, especially the concept of magic, because it really kind of frees you from a lot of constraints that other genres have in terms of the things that you can just make up and do. So, yeah.
Yes, magic comes in quite handy when you need to solve plot problems
Hmm.
sometimes. Is there a facet of writing fiction in general that's tricky for you?
I'd have to say making sure things are internally consistent and that you're following some kind of rules, even if they're hidden from the reader. Maybe that comes from my background as a gamer. I'm not sure. I think it's an all too easy trap to think that just because you're not writing about stuff that's real, that you can make up whatever you want and you're never wrong because there's no facts for others to check. So while that may be true to an extent, you still have to worry about creating those internal rules and sticking to them because if there's no limitations and borders holding you in, then everything just becomes too easy and too silly and in a way that just loses the reader's interest. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, rules are important, especially when you're writing fantasy, because
Mhm.
you have to be consistent in what you're doing. You can't say that your magic can affect, say, wood, and then 2 chapters later on, it's affecting wood. So it's like,
Right.
yeah, you have to have rules. You have to keep the rules, and if you're going to break the rules, you have to have a good reason to break the rules, and it
Yeah,
has to make sense. And I mean, there are things that
absolutely.
you have to abide by, like physics and things like that. Yeah, and you can't your horse can't cover 500 miles in 15 minutes if you're riding somewhere. So yeah, things like that, definitely.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I when I was writing my fantasy book, I had to look up, how fast does a boat travel and how
Oh, wow.
yeah, and how much distance you good. I mean, I fudged it a little bit, but my boat's kind of magic, a sentient magic boat, so I figured it could go a
Mhm.
little bit faster than a normal boat. So
Yeah.
anyway, so you can tweak things a little bit.
Yeah, but you still have to keep it, keep it real, so to speak.
Yeah,
can't go too crazy, otherwise it's. And again, yeah, consistency is just very important, and sticking to those rules that you've created. Otherwise, the reader just doesn't know what to expect, and oh, he's just making stuff up as he goes, and that's not fun. So,
Yeah, and
mm,
you the one thing you don't want to do is confuse your reader.
yeah, absolutely.
So, what's your favorite aspect of being a writer?
Well, at the risk of sounding cliche, I'd have to say it's just being able to give wings to my imagination. More of that is sometimes not really having a specific plan for how a scene or chapter will play out in its entirety, then just starting to write and having those flashes of inspiration come to you out of nowhere. Um, it's not that I don't map out some things and come at it with an overall plan, but sometimes it's just really that spontaneous aspect that creativity has that I really, really love. Also, and I say this humbly, it's the pleasure of having someone else read my story and really enjoy what I created.
Yeah, that's what every writer wants, I think, that readers enjoy
Mhm.
your stories. So, who are some of your favorite authors? And is there anything special on that was on your to read list this year?
Well, this year's almost done, and I haven't touched another book yet, so I guess I flunked that question. As you get
Oh,
older,
yeah, don't
I'm
worry
just
about it. My reading this year wasn't really great either. So,
yeah. As I was saying, as you get older, time just isn't what it used to be.
yeah,
I can't believe how many books I just consumed when I was younger, and now it's just everything else tears at your attention. And I really want to get back to that one day. It's for sure plan to revisit all my favorites on my bookshelf, but yeah, it's just finding the time. But
yeah. So, who are some of your
I
favorite
do
authors? Even though you haven't
I
read
do have a
any
new
of them this year.
series that it's called the Last King of Austin Ard, which is the sequel to one of my favorite trilogies by Tad Williams. Uh, it's called Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn that very much want to read when I find that time. I really enjoyed that first series, so I can't wait to see where the story goes next. Um, Aside from that, I do love Terry Brooks's long-running Shannara series, all 32 books, a bit. Uh, David Eddings, Belgariad, of course, is a classic for me, and of course, anything to do with the world of Middle Earth and J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yeah,
Some
those
of
are
my
some
mainstays.
good solid fantasy authors there. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, what's your next project? What can readers expect from you in the future?
Well, the next thing I'm already hard at work on, of course, is the sequel to Bloodlines. It's the second book in the series, which I've titled "Children of a Forgotten Star." Although the second book itself doesn't have a title yet. I hope to have this done and in front of my editor by next summer, so that hopefully the readers don't have uh, to wait too long to see what happens next. From there, it's on to book three, and after that, well, who knows?
Yeah, so that's what the readers can look forward to. Read the first one, and then the other ones are upcoming, and you can probably get your pre-orders in.
Fingers and toes crossed.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to wrap the episode up there. Then I'd love to thank you for being a guest. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. Pleasure being
Okay.
here.
Okay. That's it for this episode, and be sure to check out more videos on the House of Shadows and Ink. Bye for now, everybody.